Hi, thanks for using My Court Coach. I'm Jaylyn, and I'm going to be your instructor as we talk about the Domestic Violence Prevention Act. The Domestic Violence Prevention Act starts with California Family Code Sections 6200. So if we look at the California legislators, they cited a whole entire division titled the Domestic Violence Prevention Act. And it defines abuse, affinity, cohabitant, dating relationship, as well as domestic violence, emergency protective orders, and as it defines every single word in a domestic violence restraining order, it would be very helpful to go ahead and review those. So, for the purposes of the Domestic Violence Prevention Act, they define it as to intentionally or recklessly cause or attempt to cause bodily injury, sexual assault, to place a person in reasonable apprehension of imminent serious bodily injury to that person or to another, to engage in any behavior that has been or could be enjoined pursuant to Section 6320. And lastly, abuse is not limited to the actual infliction of physical injury or assault. So what does this entire section mean? Essentially, if somebody has threatened your safety in any way, then you qualify to be protected under the Domestic Violence Prevention Act. It doesn't have to be physical, and it specifically states that here at the bottom, that abuse is not limited to physical injury. Somebody can be emotionally abusive, physically abusive, mentally abusive as well. Although those standard of proofs is a little bit more difficult to fulfill, the physical abuse is not the only way to get a restraining order. So I wanted to also, touch on the issue of to intentionally or recklessly cause or attempt to cause bodily injury. So if somebody, for example, was charging at you and you took a step back, and when you took that step back, you ended up falling on the ground, and that was exactly what the person had wanted to do when they charged at you. They had wanted you to be hurt in some way. They knew that if you were going to get startled and you were going to fall backward if they charged at you. So that's somebody who is intentionally doing it, or if their only intention was just to scare you, but you actually did fall, then that is considered reckless because they intended to cause bodily injury, or at least had the thought of causing bodily injury. And then sexual assault, so any unwanted sexual behaviors, that would be a sexual assault, and you'd qualify for domestic violence prevention. And then to place somebody in reasonable apprehension of imminent serious bodily injury to that person or to another. So if somebody had held their fist close to your face, but they really weren't going to punch you, but they made you feel like they were about to punch you just based off of the circumstances that their hand is very close to your face, then that person is putting you in a reasonable apprehension of imminent serious bodily injury. So it is reasonable for you to feel and believe that this person actually would, punch you, even though they didn't actually do it. But that is, in fact, their intention is to scare you, that you would, in fact, get injured. So to engage in any behavior that has been or could have been enjoined pursuant to 6320, we will get to that in a later section, but those behaviors are essentially keeping somebody under surveillance, harassment, stalking, things along those nature. And then, like I stated before, abuse can be in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be physical. So domestic violence, that term means anything that is family related, any relationships that are familial or romantic. So it says affinities, when applied to the marriage relationship, signifies the connection, existing consequences of marriage between each of the married persons and the blood relatives of the other. Cohabitant means a person who regularly resides in the household. Former cohabitant means a person who formerly regularly resided in the household. Dating relationship means frequent intimate associations, primarily characterized by the exception of affection or sexual involvement, independent of financial considerations. And then any of the following persons. So a spouse, a former spouse, a cohabitant, a person with whom the respondent is having or had a dating or engagement relationship, a person with whom the respondent has a child of a party or a child who's the subject of an action, and any other person related by the consanguinity or affinity within the second degree. So those are all individuals that can qualify for a domestic violence prevention order. The court does not allow individuals that do not fit this does not fit these family code sections, don't fit these sort of relationships. They are having to file a different type of restraining order. And so that could be a civil harassment restraining order or an elderly abuse restraining order. So if you do have some sort of relationship, whether it's intimate or familial, or relationship within the second degree, then the court would allow you to file a domestic violence restraining order. So emergency protective order, that would be defined under 6240, and we'll get to that. Protective orders means any order that includes any of the following restraining orders, whether they're issued ex parte, which means emergency, after notice and hearing, or in a judgment. So an order described in 6320, enjoining specific acts, 6321, enjoining a person from a dwelling, or 6322, enjoining any other specified behavior, and we'll get to those in a moment. And then 6219, essentially that the local courts can go ahead and identify the measures in which it should enforce the Domestic Violence Prevention Act. So Family Code Section 6220 provides the purpose, and it's for a separation of the persons involved in the domestic violence for a period sufficient to enable these persons to seek a resolution of the causes of the violence. In summary, it's to deter or to prevent future acts of domestic violence against the victim. So what period of time will the courts need to issue the restraining order in order to prevent this domestic violence to reoccur again? And it could be anywhere from 6 months to 5 years. So when you make your request for a domestic violence restraining order, the courts only have the ability to issue a restraining order up to 5 years. Or orders, emergency orders, because when you file for a request for a domestic violence restraining order, you can request a temporary restraining order where you get it within that same day or within 24 hours, or you can wait 3 weeks to obtain a restraining order after you file your request for a restraining order. So ex parte orders are temporary emergency orders, and under Family Code 6320, the court can issue an emergency order to prevent somebody from molesting, attacking, striking, stalking, threatening, sexually assaulting, battering you, credibly impersonating you, falsely impersonating you, harassing you, telephoning you, including but not limited to annoying telephone calls, destroying your personal property, contacting you directly or indirectly, by mail or otherwise, coming within a specified distance of you, disturbing your peace, and in the discretion of the court can protect other household members or other individuals in your family so that the other person does not, in fact, continue to do these abusive tendencies. So the court also has the ability to protect your animals, so they can give you the ability to have exclusive care, possession, and control any animals that you possess, own, lease, or hold. And the court may order the other party, the alleged abuser, to stay away from that animal and cannot do anything such as concealing, molesting, striking, or threatening or harming the animal. So by law, the court has to issue a restraining order hearing within 21 to 25 days of them issuing an emergency protective order, a temporary restraining order. And so this is mentioned in Family Code section 6320.5. In 6321, the court can issue a party be removed from a house as well on an ex parte basis. The court can do essentially anything that you request to prevent that party from continuously abusing you in any way. So whatever that request will be, the court does have the authority to issue that on a temporary emergency basis. And then lastly, the other party can not take steps to obtain your address or location of you or any of the other parties that are protected under the restraining order. The restraining order can also protect your children, and you can review the emergency laws with respect to custody and visitation. But in summary, the court will protect your children even if they were not physically abused by the other parent, but they witnessed the abuse, they were around during the time of abuse. The court would prefer that the parents not continuously exchange the children during that time, because it is traumatic for the children to be experiencing the abuse, whether they actually witnessed it or just heard it. So the court does make child custody and visitation orders during a request for domestic violence. And typically that request is for no visitation or supervised visitations. So it depends on your specific circumstance. The other thing that I wanted to address is the CLETS form. So the California Law Enforcement Telecommunications System. So how does law enforcement actually enforce your restraining order? And the way that they do it is when you file for a restraining order, you'll fill out a form that has all of your identifying information, as well as the protected parties' identifying information, as well as the alleged abusers' identifying information. And so that information will be confidential, and it is handed to the Department of Justice, and then it's essentially nationwide. The entire nation would have and would know about the restraining order in case you travel and you're out somewhere and you see the other party and you need assistance, and you can actually show your restraining order, and somebody out in Hawaii can see that, oh, this person has a restraining order against that person, and therefore they need to make an arrest for the violation of the restraining order. So this is actually pretty great because you're safe within the nation while the restraining order is in effect. Well, I hope this helps, and good luck.